in the existence of an independent spiritual soul, but thought that the soul was contingent on and subservient to the existence of the physical body. That is why the Egyptians went to such great lengths to embalm corpses. They thought that one's existence hinges solely on his physical reality. Death, in their view, merely means that one is no longer able to move or speak, but still exists. In every other respect, accordingly, they also invested enormous efforts in building the pyramids, which are glorified cemeteries for the body. To be sure, the material world has an important place in Judaism as well. However, a worldview based solely on physical existence will necessarily be idolatrous and amoral. This is because all the paradigms provided by nature are amoral. There may be beauty and wisdom reflected in the amazing regularity of the laws of nature, but they do not possess morality. The strong prey on the weak, just as the powerful enslave the poor. The pagan worldview, instead of striving toward a higher level, sanctifies material existence with all its brutality and injustice. In contrast, faith-based and spiritual worldview is characterized by constant striving toward improving the world, fighting evil, and empowering justice. This is how the prophet Yeshayahu described the ultimate redemption in Mashiach's leadership. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the land. He shall smite the land with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. Righteousness shall be the girdle of his waist, faithfulness the girdle of his loins. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid. The cow and the bear shall graze, together their young shall lie down. The lion shall eat straw like cattle. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Thus, the exodus from Egypt was not merely an emancipation of the Israelites enslaved in Egypt. Rather, it was the liberation of all mankind from the chains of materialism. This is why it is so important to delve into the Exodus, to the extent that we are commanded to see ourselves every year on the Seder night as though we ourselves left Egypt. We've also been commanded to remember the Exodus every day and every night. To a certain extent, Shabbat and all the holidays were established to commemorate the Exodus. For at the Exodus, the spirit of man was freed from the bonds of material existence. Since we have not finished liberating ourselves from the bonds of the material world, the chains of the evil impulse and its lusts, from a spiritual perspective, we still need to continue leaving Egypt. Hence, it is a mitzvah to delve into the Exodus. Number 4, section 4 on page 5. The way this world is ordered, its material aspects gain prominence. First, and easily reach their complete powerful expression. Spiritual elements, however, remain hidden. It takes a long time before their significance becomes discernible. It was thus natural that the Egyptians initially overpowered Israel, for Egyptian might had already come to its fruition, while Israel was still like an unborn embryo. Since Israel's strength could not yet be expressed, the Egyptians exploited Israel's weakness and enslaved them to fuel their glory and their lusts. But this was also for the best. Spirituality cannot be expressed in the world without a material basis. And this is exactly what we gained from being enslaved in Egypt. During the entire period that the Egyptians enslaved Israel and thought that they were overpowering us completely, in reality, we were drawing and absorbing their power. As it is written, the Israelites were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. The more the Egyptians tried to enslave and subdue us, the more we increased, as it is written, the more they tormented them, the more they multiplied and more they proliferated, until we numbered 600,000 adult men. Maharal explains that this was the number necessary for the establishment of the nation of Israel. Once we numbered 600,000, an aspect of the divine was revealed within us. The Egyptian empire collapsed, and we left Egypt to receive the Torah at Sinai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol yam. Page 6.
Too far. Oh.
So we have to take the material plenty and elevate it. That's what we do when we leave Egypt. Not only were we blessed with fertility in Egypt, we also leave Egypt with great wealth, compensation for many years of slavery. Thus Israel began its course with a solid material foundation. This is the meaning of when you go, you should not go empty-handed. Rather, every woman shall ask of her neighbor, and she who lives in her house, silver, gold vessels, and clothes, and you should put them upon your sons and your daughters, and thus you shall despoil Egypt. The Egyptians got their just deserts. Had they chosen to be righteous, they would have taken care of the Israelites and helped them multiply and prosper. They would have benefited from this doubly, as they did when Yosef contributed to Egypt's success during the difficult years of famine. But they chose evil, cruelly enslaving Israel. And consequently, they were punished with the 10 plagues. The name of God was thus sanctified in the world. For the wicked were brought to justice, and Israel left to eternal freedom. So he says, we came out of Egypt with gold and silver, not just to punish the Egyptians, take their money away. Also, it's a spiritual idea that we are taking the material goods away from the Egyptian pagans who used the material world to claim that this was all there is, and this is all that matters, and everything is what's important is physical. And we come to teach the world, no, there's morality, there are values for which the material is necessary. We needed to become a nation and to have gold and silver, and then elevate it by receiving the Torah. L'chaim, l'chaim. Good morning, Hananel. Good morning, Pinchas. Good morning, Israel. I'm okay. A former student of ours died yesterday. Yeah. So we're a little bit involved in trying to get all the funeral arrangements. He's an orphan. He doesn't have family in Israel. So we're in and out of trying to make those arrangements for the funeral later today. So it's quite a shock. It's quite a shock.
Young one?
34. Yeah.
Due to illnesses?
You could say that, yeah. He was definitely struggling with illness. But we have to learn Torah.
Yeah.
The Torah we learn will be for the benefit of his soul.
Yeah.
Natan Jonah Ben Avraham, he completed a Giur here with us. And the latest is we can't find his papers to prove that he's Jewish. To bury him in a Jewish cemetery. They want to see the papers. We can't find them. We're going to have to work it out. Bezrat Hashem.
Is he an older guy? I saw it on your Facebook.
34 years old. Not
From
old.
the advanced group, is he? Or the old student?
No. He was here about 7 years ago, 8 years ago. He's a young guy. He came, he did the army, did Giur with us, and moved on, but we were in touch with him. Yes. So, of course, there's questions that come up regarding the laws of death and mourning. So, it's no better way to learn than in practice. So, I was asked last night, what should we do about the burial, first of all? I guess I'm the closest contact in Israel, other than the place he was living with some other people, but he has one sister, his only relative. He found a distant cousin, actually, I remembered later, but they're not in touch so much. And so they called the sister, and they wanted to know, do they want to come to the funeral? Are they going to be able to come to the funeral? In principle, in Jerusalem, they're very, very careful about something called, a prohibition called halanat hamet. You're not supposed to let the corpse lie overnight. You're supposed to bury it as soon as possible. It's considered to be respect for the dead, especially back to the days when there was no refrigeration. Bad things could happen to the body if you left it out for too long. But the tradition is also based on spiritual ideas, that it's always best to bury, it's a mitzvah to bury the deceased as soon as possible. So the sister called me to consult with me, what do I think? She discussed it with her husband. She felt she couldn't come. It would be too hard for her to come to see her only relative be put in the ground. So I told her there's no one right answer. There's, obviously he's going to get a very respectable burial here, and all the people that is here. He wanted to be here. My estimation, he would have wanted to be buried here. He made Aliyah. He wanted to live his life here. Yes. Sure. Yes. Okay. So they agreed with me that he should be buried here, and that we're going to have a Zoom video link for them to watch, for her sister to watch the burial in England. But we're waiting to figure out a time for the burial. So there's, as our friend here, Binyamin, knows well, most Jewish communities have something called a burial society. In Hebrew, it's actually Aramaic. We use the Aramaic word chevra kadisha. It means a holy society. Deal with burial. And in Israel, there are many, many chevrot kadisha, and every municipality has one or two or three, and they take care of all the arrangements for the burial, and they take care of the body, and they clean up the body, and they put on the shrouds, and there are so all you have to do is call one of them. Every citizen in Israel gets free burial. It's part of the socialist upbringing of this state of Israel, which is a good thing. Even if you're not a citizen, if you die in Israel, you get a free burial. But the custom is that we bury Jews in a Jewish cemetery and non-Jews in a different cemetery. So they're trying to find proof that he's Jewish. I told them to call me. So if I get a call, I'm going to have to answer the phone. Because everybody's waiting to hear when is the funeral, but they can't decide when the funeral is going to be until they decide where they're going to do it and how they're going to do it. And so, Be'ezrat Hashem will work it out, the technical details. In any case, officially there's only laws of mourning for relatives, siblings, children, parents, of which really he has none. The assumption is that his sister is not Jewish, although there's a chance. But so probably I'll be saying Kaddish on his behalf. And but there's no Shiva really. Nobody will be saying Shiva. So we have to learn. We have to learn from this to be strong. Even though we have difficult times, and he sure had a difficult life. He was brought up in an orphanage. His parents died when he was very young. And the Christian nuns knew he was Jewish, so they took him to a shul on Yom Kippur. But he chose to follow his grasping at identity and came to Israel, made it official, did a giur with us here in Machon Meir, and faced a lot of difficulties. And he was very loved, and he was a wonderful guy. Just invited him for Shabbat last week. He said he didn't feel well, so he didn't come. But we have to be strong to know that Hashem is with us at all times, even when things are difficult. And we are all loved. We're all loved by somebody. If you don't have somebody outside of Machon Meir, we here are all loving each other. And I love you. They say that students are like children in some ways. It's very strange when you're a rabbi, you can have children who are older than you. Of all ages. So I guess that's why I'm a little bit preoccupied now. But we, as I said, the Torah learning is what we have to keep doing in his memory and strengthen our Jewish identity and our love of each other and our strength to persevere throughout all the difficulties. Everybody is going through their own difficulties. Some people have health issues, some people have mental health issues, some people have struggles of various kinds with their families. Some people have struggles of all kinds. And if Hashem can take us out of Egypt, He can redeem us from all the troubles. What's the troubles that we have compared to Pharaoh, the evil Pharaoh? A worldview which was entirely opposite of the Jewish worldview, of the spiritual living within the material. But Hashem led us out of Egypt and redeemed us. So we have to think about that every day. We remember the Exodus every day, and especially on Pesach coming up soon. We celebrate that and we focus on the birth of the Jewish people. It's the going beyond the physical reality. 120 years, 34 years. Everybody has their time. But beyond that, if you connect yourself to Hashem and to the Jewish people, you connect yourself to eternity, to spirituality which lives forever. Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, let's continue section 5. You can ask questions if anybody wants to about the laws of Avelut or something, but we'll probably talk about it more another time. Let's continue. We're on page 6, section 5. The meaning of the prohibition against chametz, the central mitzvah. If you remember yesterday, we covered the beginning. We talked about two names of the festival of Pesach, Chag HaMatzot and Chag HaPesach. Chag HaMatzot, we said, is the perhaps more universal aspect of the Exodus. Teaches us so much how God intervenes in the world. God has providence over the world, and God has might to overcome everything and anyone And of course, the Chag HaMatzot has to do with the matzah. The uniqueness of the matzah, of course, is that it has no chametz. It's bread which is made without leaven. Why is that the symbol? Why is that the symbol of this redemption? I think what Malamed wants to tell us here in the following section. Okay, so who's going to read for us? Michael Arya, maybe you'll read for us, please. The prohibition against chametz.
The prohibition against chametz on Pesach is especially strengthened for the Torah not only forbade eating it, but commanded that it not be seen or found in our possession. Our sages further forbade eating any food with even the slightest amount of chametz mixed in. Thus, the avoidance of chametz on Pesach is absolute. This is because chametz symbolizes evil, as it says in the Zohar. But chametz is the evil impulse. Specifically, it alludes to the impulse of pride. Fermentation causes dough to rise. It looks as though the dough is inflating itself and puffing up with pride, as an arrogant person will. In contrast, matzah, which remains in its original size as it was when God created it, symbolizes the trait of humility. At first glance, this is difficult to understand. If chametz represents the evil inclination, then why is there no commandment or custom to avoid it throughout the year? On the contrary, man is praised for knowing how to make way into tasty chametz cakes. This was the greatest purpose in endowing man with the wisdom and practical skills to engage in developing the will. God created an imperfect will intentionally, so that man could imitate his deeds and participate in improving the world through scientific and technological development. The answer is that there are two types of pride. One is that man exaggerates his own praiseworthiness and thinks he is wiser, stronger, and better than he really is. Any intelligent person understands that such pride harms one's ability to actualize his potential for the betterment of the world. His ability to judge is completely impaired, and he cannot conduct his life properly. Clearly, such pride is inappropriate all year long and has nothing to do with the prohibition of chametz. On the contrary, such pride detracts from one's good works and thus harms the good year around chametz. The second type of pride, which corresponds to chametz on Pesach, is man's pride vis-a-vis his creator, his God. Jewish faith is predicated on the acknowledgement that God created the world and determined its destiny, and that the roads of all things depend on Him alone. Although God gave man the ability to improve and to develop the world, this is limited to man manipulating and developing the outgrowths of the root elements of creation. Man has no power over the root elements, which are divine creations. God created the world, chose the people of Israel to be His Am Segula, His treasured nation, and give them the Torah. Man has no authority to call this fundamental principle into question. Therefore, when one stands before his Creator, he must envelop himself in humility and make every effort not to mix his petty human thoughts with the fundamental principles of creation. Such confusion, like comments on Pesach, is forbidden.
Okay, so I hope everybody got that. Two types of pride. You're supposed to be humble. It doesn't mean you lack in self-esteem. It's Rabbi Dr. Twersky, of blessed memory, wrote 30 or 60 books. Over 60 books. Maybe, I think I heard the latest count was 80 books. And somebody asked him, how could you write so many books? He said, really, I only wrote one book in 80 different ways. One of his major themes, he was a psychologist, and he discovered that in his estimation, the disease of the modern age is that, at least in America, people lack in self-esteem. People don't have a healthy sense of who they are, and people can get confused also by Judaism, because we say so much how you have to be humble, and put yourself down, make yourself low. Lowliness is a good trait. but there's two types. It doesn't mean that you don't know who you are. Excuse me. It doesn't mean that you don't appreciate the talents that you have. To ignore that is just stupid. And it's not true. Excuse me. Everybody is given talents and intelligence and good qualities and abilities. And just to ignore them is wrong. It's incorrect. It's objectively wrong. And what are we supposed to live in a dream? יש משהו? שלחת? מעולה. תודה רבה. סליחה, רבותיי. אשריך. אני שולח להם עכשיו. Okay, we got the Tudat Amr. Mitzvah. So, two types of pride. The bad type of pride is stupid. But so is it's stupid to not have the good type of pride. You have to have a sense of self-worth, or you go around looking for self-worth by defining yourself by your career, defining yourself by your sports team, defining yourself by your looks. There's so many different ways people are searching, grasping, because they want to have a healthy sense of self. It's unhealthy. You have to have a healthy sense of self, because you were created by God and given talents. And that's a good type of pride. You should be happy that you are healthy and you have so many qualities to you. The bad type of pride is when you don't realize that you are essentially not the source of all this goodness. You think, like it says about Paro, the prophet speaks about the Egyptian Pharaoh, that says, Li ori, va'ani asitini. The river Nile, this was the source of pride of all the Egyptians, is mine, and I made myself. That's, of course, haughtiness. That's improper. We have to see ourselves as vessels through which the divine power streams and runs through us and courses through, gives us life. Are we a self-independent power plant, or are we like this light or this phone that's channeling? It has current running through it. It has to be plugged in to the source of power. The source of power is only Hashem, who created the world. So that's why we have to be humble. We have to be humble, not with a false sense of humility, but recognize that we have such great talents. But the talents don't come from us. They're not. So chametz is very tricky. Chametz represents pride, right? Because it's it blows up. Chametz is puffed up. Like when you get full of yourself, you puff up your chest. And you're very proud. So proud is tricky business. So our Torah teaches us with great wisdom. We can try to appreciate some of the great wisdom that for 7 days, when you're first born, Jewish people come out of Egypt, for 7 days they're not allowed to have a bread that is leavened, that is risen. And every year we have to repeat this exercise. It's almost like training camp. You know, in Israel, everybody has to be a soldier. The army consists of very few soldiers. How could that be? If everybody's a soldier, how can there be such a small... The answer is there's a standing army, and then there's the reserves. The reserve army. The reserve army, they go about their daily life, they go to work, they play with their children, and then once a year they get called into the army for exercises, for training, to retrain. Also they perform some duties of guard duty and various missions. It depends on your area of expertise. But most of the soldiers have a yearly or bi-yearly training exercises so that they retain their strength and their capabilities and their expertise. And they... So you could look at the holiday of Pesach, 1 week without chametz, as miluim, as a training exercise. We have to be sure that the rest of the year, of course, we're going to eat bread, and it's a good thing. You have to be proud of yourself, and you have to strive and develop and use all of your talents and accomplish. Once a year, we have to remind ourselves, accomplishments are not ours alone. We couldn't do it all by ourselves. We have to keep plugged in. The power that we have is because Hashem gave us power. And that's a very powerful message, and that's why for a whole week the Torah says don't eat chametz. You must eat only matzah, and no chametz. Matzah is bread that did not rise. It's bread of humility and recognizing that ultimately, compared to Hashem, we are very small and very low. But that does not mean that we shouldn't have a healthy sense of pride at the same time. So this fine balance is created by the Torah by having no chametz for 1 week and then yes chametz the rest of the year. Okay, let's continue. Page 8. Michael, are you reading the first paragraph there, Pesach?
Pesach, and especially the Seder, is designed to instill in us the fundamentals of faith. That the world has a creator, that he watches over his creatures, and that he chose the people of Israel to reveal his name in the world. Whenever there is a revelation of an aspect of divine in the world, it appears in a completely miraculous fashion to show that it is not a human endeavor. Thus the Exodus was accompanied by signs and wonders to make public that the election of Israel was a divine matter. Similarly, the Torah was given with obvious miracles to a generation that lived miraculously for 40 years in the desert, in order to make it known that this was an entirely divine matter. In other words, we see the fundamental principles of faith from God. We do not invent them. Whoever mixes some human aspects into these basic principles of faith is guilty of idolatry. This is alluded to in the Zohar statement that chametz on Pesach is idolatry. Therefore, on Pesach, the holy day, geared to imparting the fundamentals of faith, we are commanded to be extremely cautious.
Excuse me, please. I continue reading. I just have to step up.
For eating and possessing even a smidgen of chametz, which symbolizes our human aspects that must not get mixed. And when we speak about the roots and foundations of faith, during the rest of the year, however, when we nurture and improve the branches that develop from those roots, chametz is allowed and even desirable. Kan ik dan de accent? Hey, zo moest het. Zo recording.
Everybody. Nou, je vrienden.
Ja, accent. Beter organized. Still veel messed up.
Coughing is cold. Is your cold?
Cold?
Because of cold.
Ja. Jammer gaan we Thursday. Hij is veel. A scold, a spit, a spit. I go sleep early.
You know what?
Yes, and then on Shabbat, I sleep. But there was the Chosno electricity went out at night. So I woke in the morning, my whole flash was gone. Yesterday was
You have a different book here.
the difference.
Your 6 is here and my 6 is here.
Oh, it's a different version.
This Pesach starts here. Yeah, this. And mine is here.
This one is longer.
Yeah.
This one is longer.
I don't know, maybe. How it's in the beginning?
Maybe you can take this. Maybe you can take this.
No, isn't it? Is here this one.
Yeah, it's but the pages is different.
Look
Right?
to chapter 1. Is it also like this, chapter 1? Here. 6. Oh, yeah. Yes, and then the next page. 2 pages.
Yeah, it's different.
Yes. Is 3 also?
It's longer. This one is longer.
This.
Yours is longer.
Mine is longer. Go to the next page. Do the 3.
Okay, sorry about that. A rabbi from England was in touch with him. He just flew back from Israel to England. So he's going to miss the Levite. Okay, so Chametz. Almost, I don't know if you missed it here. The Rabbi Melamed said that I was saying that maybe the holiday is like a 1 week of Miluim to remind us of this idea of humility. He was saying that the 40 years in the desert where they didn't eat bread, they ate man. So the entire Jewish people had, you could call it basic training maybe. they had really to instill in them that we received the gift of life from Hashem, the gift of redemption from Hashem, and not accepting those principles of faith is like idolatry. That's what he was saying. Okay, so we're on page 8, section 6, right? The meaning of matzah. Did you read it already, or
No.
not yet? Okay, perfect. So let's continue. Okay, page 8. So who wants to read now? Aaron, why don't you read for us, please?
The meaning of matzah. Matzah symbolizing our recognition that the spiritual roots of things are beyond our grasp, even though God granted us the ability to operate within and improve the world, is the opposite of chametz. Therefore, on Pesach, when we are engaged with the most fundamental elements of faith, we do not mix even one
Iota.
of chametz in our food. We eat only matzah, which remains simple and thin throughout.
So take this.
Without going through.
This is the early version. There's a new version.
This is new version.
No, we have the new version.
Through our humility before God, expressed in the matzah, we internalize the faith first revealed at the Exodus from Egypt, that God actively watches over the world and elected Israel. To be sure, there were elite individuals who believed in God even before the Exodus, but their connection with the divine was a personal nature. The wholeness of faith was first revealed only at the Exodus, with the formation of a complete nation containing all strata of society, destined to manifest God's name in the world. Matzah comes to remind us of faith and is therefore called the food of faith by the Zohar. By eating matzah on the Seder night with the proper intent, one achieves faith, and by eating matzah all 7 days of Pesach, one implants that faith firmly in one's heart. Since matzah signifies faith, it is understandable that its entire manufacturing process must be performed very meticulously, as we will learn below. This is because the roots of all things depend on faith, and any small flaw in faith can cause tremendous destruction in the world. We can thus understand why the nation of Israel came into being as slaves in Egypt. All other nations develop naturally from the ground up, from family to clan to tribe to nation. As they grow, they develop cultures that evolve out of the circumstances of their lives, the climate of their territories, and their conflicts with their neighbors. As part of the emergence of their culture, they develop some type of atheistic belief. Since human beings are involved in their invention, such beliefs are idolatrous. In contrast, Israel became a nation as slaves, devoid of any culture. They could not develop their own culture while enslaved and lacking national self-esteem. At the same time, Egyptian culture was foreign to them and possibly despised by them, as it was associated with their tormentors. Israel was thus a tabula rasa, free of preconceived notions and perfectly capable of absorbing the true faith based on divine revelation and accepting the Torah without introducing human considerations into its fundamental principles. The impoverished, and embellished matzah alludes to the condition of the Israelites at the time. What does tabula rasa mean? Is it Latin?
What?
Tabula rasa?
Okay, so Rabbi Lemon said two important things. Fascinating things. One is that, what's your favorite food, Eitan? What do you like eating?
Oh, you know,
What do you like eating? What's your favorite food?
I like everything.
Everything. Come on. One thing that's a favorite. What does your mother make that you really love?
Burko.
Burgul? Burgul. Okay.
You know what it is?
Yes, of course. Gabriel, what's your favorite food?
Arepas from Colombia.
Tarepas?
Arepas.
Alepas.
Arepas.
Pepitos, the restaurant.
Pepitos, yes.
Yeah, it's similar to that.
It's like tacos type of thing? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yafeh. What's your favorite food, Yisrael? What do you like to eat?
I no idea, but I like every food, the fresh.
Fresh fruit.
I think I like the fresh food.
Fresh fruit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fresh, for example, the fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, a long time ago, some people together, they fishing.
Yeah, the
After
fishing.
fishing, just cut the sashimi
Yeah, sashimi. Okay.
I make
Very
the
delicious.
fresh,
Okay, fresh.
very-
Okay.
But before not kosher, because I don't understand.
Ah.
And also the orange, the mango, everything is fresh. Very
Right.
good.
Okay. Good. All right.
I know.
Pinchas, you have. What can you still eat? You can't eat anything now. Huh? What could you eat? What's your favorite food to eat?
No family.
No favorite.
Call
What's gotang? What's that?
Everything's tasty cooked by your wife.
Oh, okay. Help me out here. Micha, what do you love to eat?
Chips.
Chips.
Wow.
Mhm. I like steak. Mm.
Yeah.
But we have an opportunity once a year. It's a very special food. Do you think it's tasty? It's called the food. You eat faith. Emunah. Mechla de mehemnuta. You can eat faith. The matzah is called the food of faith. You imbibe it, you bring it inside you, it becomes part of you. This is what an opportunity to eat faith. I hope it's tasty.
Very tasty.
Very tasty, huh, Stephen Leila? Yeah. Okay, and the other thing he mentioned here is that the Jewish people are very unique because we were in some ways outside of history. We're not a normal nation. Most nations, a group of people come to a country, they start living there, they develop an organizational structure, some kind of rule of law, they have customs, their traditions, foods they like to eat that are traditional foods. What's our food? What's our country? Where were we created? We have none. We were in exile when we became a nation. Our food, our native food, faith. We're like outside of history. We're a nation which is defined by our godly faith. That we were chosen by Hashem. And He created us as a nation. And so when we speak of faith, we have to be very pure. It has to be pure faith. Faith that not we created, but that was created by God. And that's the uniqueness of the Jewish people and the matzah, representing the faith of the Jewish people. Okay, that was section 6. Very interesting ideas, huh? Yes.
What is tabula rasa?
Tabula rasa is, I believe, Latin, and it means a blank slate. It's like a board which is totally erased, that's never been written on before. This, look, it's not clean. You see a little bit left over? The Talmud says that when you teach, no offense, when you teach an older person, it's like you're writing things on top of, on top of something that was written before. You can read it, but there's remnants left over. And when you teach a young child, like a blank tablet, the tabula rasa, a blank tablet. It's like the first time, it's fresh, the message is very clear. So the Jewish people, they didn't have to get rid of any older culture or any other messages. We were created into the belief in Hashem. We were like a young child. You teach him everything's new, everything's fresh, everything's clear, because it's like written on a blank slate. That's tabula rasa. Okay? Section 7. Okay, Tan, read for us, please.
The Mishnah was Rabbi Eliezer HaModai says one would desecrate holy foods, one would remains holy days, and one who expounds the Torah in accordance with halakha, even if he has Torah study and good deeds to credit, has no share in the world to come. My teacher, Rabbi Yehuda Kook, will ask how one would Torah study and good deeds to his credit will not have a share in the world to come. Moreover, since the Mishnah does not specify how much Torah study and good deeds this person has to his credit, it is implied that even if a person is a great Torah scholar, highly scrupulous in his observance of mitzvot, and a doer of many good deeds, he has no share in the world to come, since it demeans the holy days and expounds the Torah not in accordance with the halakha. Rav Yehuda went on to describe one who greatly respects tradition and is meticulous about fulfilling the requirements of the Seder, but considers it all the product of human intelligence. He explains that the importance of the Pesach holiday and the Seder lies in the parents' blessing, their traditions on to the next generations in carrying to them the moral principles of human liberty and a sense of mission to improve the world. The Machon Meir considers Israel historical consensus and the 4 cups of wine simply as a dimension of joy, even though all of these lovely ideas are true. The central fundamental principle is mission, that God chose us from among all the nations, and gave us the Torah and commanded us to celebrate Pesach and eat matzah on the Seder night. Rabbi Yehuda hypothetical Jew similarly honored Shabbat as the day when the family spends time together and grows closer, and when hardworking people can rest and engage in spiritual pursuits. He even adds that Shabbat keeps the Jews more than the Jews keep Shabbat. He forget only one thing, that God commanded us to observe Shabbat down to its fifth detail. That is what the Mishnah meant by one who expounds the Torah not in accordance with halakha, even though he studies in diligently to him. It is not God's Torah but merely human wisdom. So he allows himself to interpret it any way that comes to mind. This demands the holy days. He thinks they are costumes and traditions, and that human beings invented to give expression to all sorts of spiritual notions, thereby denying that they are God-given mitzvot of Torah. Therefore, even though he studied much Torah and performed many good deeds, and though of ungood, honorable man in this world, he has a connection with holiness. He has no share in internal historical missions of the Jewish people, and thus has no share in the world to come. You need to read more?
Yeah.
You want to read 8? You want to read 8? You don't need to read.
What?
You need to read?
The way for Rabbi. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still ready. Let's come up. You continue. No, no.
I think he said.
You continue.
Yeah,
did the Rabbi come.
Someone else wants.
Yeah, nobody wants to continue.
Who wants to read?
I'm the only CF.
You read? Want to read 8? Then maybe we need to continue with 8.
Yeah,
You want to continue?
try. The premise about the report of the law of the data beginning 30 days in 4 days. We learn this from the composers of data itself explain the matter of the data selecting. The web update for the course and available to open the as child over English takes place vertically later. The main reason for this is that's all of the Israel that their animal sacrifice and Pesach oppose extensively them to be rejected that they will be or be kindly be released. This announcement was not cancelled even after the temple was restored. It was open to study the laws of Pesach days before the holiday arrives. And it is well known that Pesach was very many laws implemented to carry the home for the Pesach. The stories are mass breaking the Machon and the
So stop there for a second. Thank you, Israel. We'll stop for a second. Here, Rabbi Menachem is talking about there's so many laws of Pesach that you have to start early. We're doing that. Tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh Adar, so we have a month left in classes. So it's not 30 days before Pesach. It's actually 45 days before Pesach, but we're being prepared because we have no classes once Rosh Chodesh Nisan comes. So we have a month left of classes, so we started early. Yafeh, that was a good introductory chapter. We'll skip now to chapter 2, and we'll learn about some details of the laws of Chametz. Ready? Thank you so much for reading, Israel. Thank you so much for reading Eitan. And let's start. Get into the rules. I see that Binyamin here has... oh, thank you so much. Thank you. The third edition. What we're reading is I think the first edition. Thank you. Of the translation into English. And they did a revised edition where they made a few changes. They didn't really change the laws, but they did add in a few added benefits. Like they put a list of certain kosher things, and they changed, they clarified some rulings. So they added a section about selling chametz on the internet, which was not in the first volume here. And they talk about Ashkenazi, soft matzah, quinoa, quinoa. So they edited it a little bit, but it's still even the 2013 edition. This is from 2021, I believe. It's really the latest edition, Binyamin's copy. But it's 260 pages. It's very similar. So yeah, you'll get confused if you use this one. We have the first edition, you have the third edition. So it's an editing process. Sometimes there's some editing, but pretty much the basic text remains the same. Okay, let's start chapter 2. General rules concerning of the prohibition against chametz. Okay, Steve, will you read for us, please?
Yeah. Four mitzvot concerning the prohibition against chametz. 4 Torah commandments deal with the prohibition against chametz. On Pesach, 3 negative and 1 positive. First prohibition is to refrain from eating chametz, as it is written, and chametz shall not be eaten. This is in Shemot 13:3. Our sages taught that the prohibition against eating chametz on Pesach 13, verse 13. In front. Yeah. Second paragraph. Second paragraph. Yeah. The Torah also said, "You shall not eat anything leavened. In all of your settlement, you shall eat matzot." This is in Shemot 12:20. Our sages concluded from this verse that not only something that have fermented on its own is prohibited, but even food that had been leavened by some external agent may not be eaten on Pesach. It must be noted that the Torah was particularly stringent concerning the prohibition against eating hametz. Almost all of the Torah food prohibition are punished by lashes, while eating hametz on Pesach is punishable by currents as still patient, as is written, "Whoever eats hametz from the first day until the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel." Shemot 12:50. The second prohibition is that no hametz may be found in our possession, as is written, 7 days there shall be no CO found in your home. Shemot 12:19. CO is the leavening agent that one uses to make dough ferment. This verse means not only that CO is forbidden, but also no hametz may be found in our possession on Pesach. This prohibition is often called Baal Matzeh. The third prohibition is no hametz may be seen in our possession, as is written, "Matzah shall be eaten 7 days, and no hametz of yours shall be seen. No CO of yours shall be seen within all your borders." Shemot 13:7. One violates the second prohibition, Baal Matzeh, and the third prohibition, called Baal Yareh, only if one has in his possession on Pesach at least one olive about kazai of hametz. If the volume of the hametz that remained in one possession was less than a kazai, he does not violate Baal Yareh and Baal Yimazeh on account of that hametz. The fourth mitzvah, a positive commandment, is to get rid of hametz and CO in advance of Pesach. As written, 7 days you shall eat matzot. However, on the first day you shall remove the CO from your houses.
4 mitzvot. What are the 4 mitzvot?
Eat matzot, 7 days.
4 mitzvot. First prohibition, don't eat chametz. Right?
Yes.
Second prohibition, don't be in possession of chametz. It's like drugs, right? There's a law against possessing illegal drugs, right? You can be thrown in jail just for owning it, having it in your possession. Third prohibition, it should not be seen in your possession. It's very similar to the second one. Not to possess and not to have it seen. And the fourth mitzvah is to get rid of it. To get rid of it beforehand. Okay. Wow. One idea, chametz, 4 different numbers among from the 613. Okay, continue, please. Who's reading this so beautifully? Stephen.
Yes.
So maybe now, who didn't read today?
Benjamin.
Binyamin. Okay, Binyamin, you read for page 14 for us.
14th, second.
Yeah, second.
Yeah, section 2, please, yeah.
The time when hametz is prohibited by Torah laws and by rabbinic laws. Although the prohibition against the hametz applies primarily during the 7 days of Hamatzot from the 15th through the 21st, 21st Nisan. Nevertheless, we are commanded to remove helmets from our homes at midday of the 14th of Nisan, Erev Pesach. The prohibition against eating helmets also begins at midday on the 14th, as is written, and you shall sacrifice the Pesach offering to God. You shall not eat hametz with it. This prohibition is it? Prohibit it is eating of remains from the time the feet for bring the Pesach sacrifice. At midday on the 14th of Nisan, this prohibition against eating hametz includes the prohibition against deriving any benefits from it. In order to distance one's father from the possibility to violate the commandments, the sage added to the prohibitions and the forbade gaining benefit from hametz for an additional hour. They also forbade eating hametz for 2 extra hours, since one a closely day probably are like 2 by much as 2 hours. This time are calculated by dividing the days into 12 equal parts. Each of each is called a seasonal hour. Shash Zamani. This one may eat hametz for the first hour, seasonal hour, of the 14th. During the 5th hours, it is rabbinically forbidden to eat hametz, but it is permissible to derive benefit from it by, for example, feeding it to an animal or selling it to a Gentile. When the 6 hours for the day begin, possession of hametz begin prohibited to rabbinically, and it is, if one forgot to sell it to a Gentile, it must be destroyed when midday arrives. That it is after the 6 hours ends, hametz is forbidden by Torah laws. Both consumptions and for deriving any benefit, and one must dispose of it as much as possible. Every moment that one does not get rid of it, he violated the positive commandment to remove the hametz. See Continue. Once the holiday begins, 2 additional prohibitions are applied. Bol Yerech and Bol Yametzeh. The prohibitions against eating hametz also becomes more severe. One who willfully eat eat hametz after midday on the 14th is punished by lashes only. Whereas one who willfully eats hametz after the holy begins is punishable by karet. This is based on the verse, whoever eats hametz from the first day during the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. Hametz becomes permissible once again after Pesach, except the fact our sage forbade hametz that belongs to Jewish during the holidays. Hametz she'avar alach ha-Pesach. Since by keeping the hametz on Pesach, he violates the prohibition of Baal Yarach and Baal Yametzeh. The sage is prohibited eating on the gain benefits from that hametz, even after Pesach. Hametz that was in the possession of a Gentile during the Pesach, however, is permissible. Jewish may buy it and eat it.
Okay. So what do we find here? The timing is a little bit tricky. Timing is a little tricky. When does the time of chametz begin? The prohibition of chametz start? The 15th is a good guess because that's the beginning of the Pesach holiday.
First day.
But it's not true because the Torah says you're not allowed to have any chametz when you bring the Pesach offering. The Pesach offering, all the Jewish people had to bring a Pesach offering to Jerusalem. It was offered not on the 15th, the beginning of the holiday. It was offered on the 14th, in the afternoon. So that they could eat the Korban Pesach at the Seder. The Seder is the night of the 15th. So really, now, so that's the offering. The Torah says, don't have any chametz in your possession when you bring the offering already. So if we just start saying prohibition of chametz starts at night, then you're not fulfilling the Torah's law. The Torah says you're not allowed to have chametz even before the festival starts.
In the morning.
What did we say? That there's two names, Chag HaMatzot and Chag HaPesach. Chag HaPesach, actually, if you look in the Torah, refers to the Chag of Korban Pesach. So really, the 14th of Nisan is like a festive day. Most Erev, the day before Shabbat is special, because you're getting ready. The day before Sukkot is special, because you're getting ready. The day before Shavuot, it's special. But it's not itself a festival. It's just you're getting ready. The day before Pesach, it's not just about getting ready for Pesach. It's actually a festival. The day before Pesach is a festival, because that's the day of bringing the sacrifice in Jerusalem. And part of those rules mean that the prohibition of chametz begins on the 14th. When on the 14th? When on the 14th? When on the 14th are you able to bring the Pesach sacrifice? Afternoon, not evening. Evening you're eating it. You have to be bringing it in the afternoon. That's the biblical law. So when does afternoon start? 12 o'clock, sure, noon. Makes sense. Okay, half an hour afternoon. So, because you got to be, if you didn't have a clock, they didn't have digital watches then. They had to look at the sun. You look at the sun, it's straight above. You wait an extra half an hour to be sure. So you could bring the Pesach sacrifice at 12:30. But The sages added extra time. And so they said, don't get rid of the chametz exactly at 12 o'clock. Even 2 hours before that. So let's say midday is 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Already chametz is prohibited.
Then is the point you burn your blessed chametz, right?
Exactly. The sages were strict, but they divided their strictness into 2 levels. One level is when you have to get rid of the chametz out of your house. And then the second level is when you're not allowed to eat it anymore. So not to eat it, we say 2 hours before. And not then you can still own it for another hour, and then you have an hour left until that's only rabbinically prohibited until the prohibition becomes biblical. Okay, so this extra time of prohibition of chametz is on the 14th. How do we calculate the hours? Not like I said on the clock, 60 minutes. Halachic hours. Halachic hours are relative to the size of the day, right? Relative to the size of the day. Today, what time is sunrise?
Sunrise
6:20. What time is sunset?
6:55, 4:55.
5:30,
5:30.
5:20.
No.
40 minutes after the
Sunset.
sunset.
Sunset is approximately
6.
no.
No, it's
5:25. 5:29 today. 5:29. Shkia, sunset. So you take the time between 6:20 and 5:20. How many hours does that give you?
6:20 and
6:20 at the sunrise, 5:20 the sunsets. How many hours is the day?
3 hours.
No.
Just the daytime hours. The daytime hours. It's 11 hours.
Oh.
Instead of 12. If it was exactly 6 to 6, midday would be 12. But it's not. It's 6:20. So it's a little bit after 12. But then it's not going to be exactly 60-minute hours. Each hour is going to be about 50 minutes to get to 11 hours in sum total. So you work out the relative amount of hours. What an hour is worth 50 minutes. And you go back from midday. Midday is about 12:20. Midday is 12:30. And then you work back from there 2 hours, and you have the prohibition of owning chametz or having any benefit from it, and the that's when you're 1 hour. The 5th hour you're not allowed to eat chametz, and then 1 hour before noon you're not allowed to own chametz, and you have to destroy it. So you're right, that's when we burn the chametz, we destroy it. We have to get rid of it out of our possession. The latest time is 1 hour before noon. 1 hour before noon on the 14th of Nisan. Okay, we have a definition. How long does the prohibition of chametz last? For how long?
7 days.
7 days. And when the 7 days are over?
The 21.
Have a beer. Right?
No.
Have a pita. Why
No,
not?
Because it's all chametz.
What's chametz?
The yeast.
It's gone. I didn't have it. I'm going to buy it.
No.
I don't have any.
It's not allowed.
Of course it is.
You have to redeem it.
Many great Hasidic rabbis. 7 days. The holiday's over. 7 days. The holiday's over.
Yes.
You go and you have a beer.
Yeah.
Make havdalah on beer. Right? Beer is made from barley. Barley is prohibited. Barley is chametz. But if you don't, you're not allowed to own it. How do you have it? You go and buy some.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. There's a very special custom. I mentioned the Hasidic Rabbi. Some of them made havdalah and beer. There's a Moroccan festival. It's called Mimuna. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Mimuna is a big party. in Israel. It's becoming very popular. And they have a big chametz party. All kinds of chametz the night after Pesach. After the 7 days are over, they make Havdalah, and then they start preparing all sorts of cakes and cookies and breads and a big feast full of chametz.
Where do they get this stuff?
Good question. Where do you think? Well, the truth is, you're allowed to keep flour. Flour is not necessarily chametz if it's been guarded. And so you take some flour. The minute you make Havdalah, 7 days are up, and you put it in the oven. An hour later, you've got the cake. You have the flour. Flour is not chametz. It's only if the flour touches water that it starts to rise. And so if you have very clean flour, very kosher Pesach flour, you can keep it all week long. To tell you the truth, not everybody bakes fresh. I think a lot of people rely on something we're going to learn about later, which you might have heard of before. It's a loophole. Can you say loophole in Chinese?
Lotong.
You're not allowed to eat chametz, of course. You're not even allowed to own chametz. But if it doesn't belong to you, then there's no prohibition. So what do the rabbis, hundreds of years ago, when people started to have big companies with millions of dollars worth of chametz, they couldn't just tell them throw it all out. And so they came up with this idea that we'll sell it to a non-Jew. So if you own any chametz, if you have any bread, the best is, of course, to do what the Torah says. Get rid of it. Burn it the day before chametz, or destroy it. We'll see. We'll talk about the details. But if you can't, if it's too hard, I know some people, they have in their closet bottles and bottles of whiskey. Whiskey is very expensive. It could be worth thousands and thousands of shekels. So I don't want to pour it all down the drain. It's such a loss, such a great loss. So they sell the chametz to a non-Jew. They lock it away so nobody will take it during chametz. It belongs to a non-Jew. It's in my house, but it belongs to a non-Jew. And that's, I think, how many people celebrate the Mimuna right after Pesach is over. How can they? Right away, have so much breads and cakes and cookies. They have it in the freezer. They made it before Pesach. They take it out. Or maybe they make it right away. You can make it very quickly. The flour is not chametz. Nowadays, we're a little bit careful with flour too. We only have flour if it's been specially guarded and checked. But anyways, that's the prohibition. After the 7th day, chametz is allowed. Okay. Now, what is chametz? How do we define chametz halachically? This is we're going to see on page 16 and 17. It's actually quite interesting. Scientifically, it's interesting. What is this process? We all know that bread rises. But how exactly it happens? So in order to have chametz, which is prohibited, you have to start with something made from the 5 grains. I want everybody by tomorrow to know the 5 grains off by heart. They're here on page 16. You can write them down in your notebook. You can write them down in your head. Hananel, do you know the 5 grains already? What are they? Chita is wheat. Yes. What's next? Seura. What's that? Barley in English. Yes. What's next? Kusmi, that's spelt. Good. What else? You're looking. You know 3 so far. Why? He knows Hebrew better. Why not? You read it, but you forgot. How about that? So you have to practice. Okay? The 5 special grains. It's on page 16, in the beginning of section 3. Chametz is prohibited by Torah and Pesach is any one of the 5 special species of cereal grains that come into contact with water and fermented. The 5 species are wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. These species are used to make bread, the staple food of mankind. They have a special bracha, motzi lechem min haaretz. If you eat any of the 5, anything made from the 5 grains, and if you didn't have bread, then you make ala michya. In order the bread be tasty, the dough is fermented and made to rise. Now there are 2 types of leaven products. What makes the dough rise? Chametz and seor. Chametz is a regular leavening of dough to bake breads and cakes. Fermentation is accomplished by leaving the dough at rest. You know that there's in the air, all around us, there are bacteria which will ferment the dough. If you want to not rely on the little bit of bacteria that's in the air, you want it to go faster, you put in seor. Seor is sourdough.
Yeast, right?
Yeast. Sometimes you make a dough with yeast, and then you keep it, and then you use it again for the next bread. It's called sourdough. You use it again for the next bread. A little bit of yeast. It's a special type of yeast. There's live yeast versus, a dry yeast. It is produced by leaving chametz for a long time, so it continues to effervesce and ferment until it tastes so sour, people cannot eat it. That's why it's called sour bread. If you make bread with this special yeast, it tastes a little sour. Okay, but the Torah forbids both the edible kind and the not edible kind. Whoever eats a kazait of chametz, bread made that leavened, or seor, the sourdough stuff, is violating the Torah commandment of eating chametz, and if you own it, you're violating bal yira'eh and bal yimatzeh. But section 17, page 17, the next paragraph says, but if the flour of the 5 stale grains is mixed with water, kneaded rapidly, and put into an oven immediately, then the dough will not have enough time to rise. This is matzah. Matzah has to also be made from the 5 grains. It has to have the potential of becoming chametz, but it didn't. It didn't rise. And that's what we remember the dough of the Jewish people when they left Egypt. It's interesting, specifically these 5 species have the ability to rise. Nowadays we know scientifically they have gluten in them. Gluten is a special enzyme which it creates a form of a film, like a barrier. And then when the air ferments underneath, when the dough ferments, it creates air, and the air lifts up this like a balloon. That's why the dough rises. Other grains don't have the gluten, so they don't have like the balloon. A balloon with no balloon is just air. It doesn't necessarily get bigger. It doesn't rise, and so that's we know that scientifically why that happens. Be sure that the last of these 5 species, note that kusmin spelt is not the same as kusemet. In Hebrew, it's confusing. Kusemet is a type of grain called buckwheat. Kusmin is one of the 5 species, and buckwheat is just a legume. It's not. It doesn't make chametz. Ashkenazi custom is not to eat it. It's called kitniot. Legumes are called kitniot. We'll talk about that later. But people confuse the names because they're very similar. Kusemet and kusmin. Kusemet is usually called kasha. If you come from Europe, yeah, kasha. Kasha is buckwheat. It's not chametz. It's a legume. People eat it like a grain. It's like a grain substitute. Similarly, quinoa. People eat it like a grain, but it's not one of the 5. It doesn't have any gluten, yeah.
The chametz only made of the 5 space of the.
Correct.
But why the Ashkenazi forbidden eating
Legumes. Rice, exactly. We're gonna learn that in a later chapter. I think the laws of Kitniot is chapter 9. Chapter 9 talks about that. Okay? We'll get to there Be'ezrat Hashem soon. It's an Ashkenazi custom not to have not only chametz but also not kitniot or legumes. It's a certain group of foods, additional foods which are not allowed to eat. But nobody disagrees now that it's not considered chametz. There's a debate in the Talmud, but pretty much we've come to the conclusion that kitniot is not chametz, but some communities have a custom not to eat it. We'll continue, B'ezrat Hashem, talking about the laws of chametz, what it constitutes chametz, and therefore what constitutes matzah tomorrow. By tomorrow, everybody knows the 5 grains? Okay? B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, thank you.